Hello, I'm April, and welcome to the 5-minute grant making sessions. The 4 cost principles. The 4 cost principles are the guiding principles when budgeting for grants. So they answer basically those questions related to, can I add this item into my budget, and how can I add this item, and where in my budget should this item go? So it starts with allowability. Essentially, is it allowed by laws and regulations surrounding the solicitation, surrounding the agreement in any way at all levels? This means federal level with all the federal regulations and agency specific regulations like the NSF, BABBG. Any document issued as part of the funding opportunity. This means the actual solicitation and anything that may come in the package of the funding opportunity. For example, there may be restrictions in salaries of co-PIs, MPIs, and participants. All of that must be respected and is considered part of allowability. Also, your institution may have its own regulations, will likely have its own regulations. In UNLV, we have the NSHE regulations, and we have a few policies and forms that must be followed for the allowability to be covered. Important note, if you are subawarded, and you still need to abide by the rules of your agency, of your institution, and all the rules here mentioned. So the subaward doesn't exclude the awardees from any of the rules related to allowability. A second point is if it's allocable. Allocable means it has to be allocated to a specific item in the budget. So again, an item in your budget, a cost in your budget needs to be allocated to a specific item. It can't just be spending for the sake of spending. So for example, miscellaneous without any justification, just thousands of dollars in miscellaneous without any justification. So the Federal Code of Regulations speaks of that, and if anything changes from the original budget, the adjustments must happen so that the allocable item is allocated, allocable cost is allocated to a new item. Examples are percentage of time and effort, materials and supplies, participant supports and services. The third point is if it's reasonable. This is related to having a best price for the work. So checking for different quotes, at least 3 different quotes depending on the value might be actually a requirement in the institution, and checking for regulations on that which they exist at the federal level, and checking also if providers have any kind of personal relationship with the proposers, with whoever is being awarded. That would present a possible conflict of interest that must be avoided as well, and if it's under being reasonable expenditure or not. And the final one is if it is consistent. Consistent means if your institution has practices that it often uses in grants and sponsored projects. What are those practices? And you should probably follow those practices because of consistency. Examples can be, for example, hiring a GA, a graduate assistant. That is usually something that is highly consistent within the institution. In UNLV, for example, there are tables and websites and a lot of information with very specific costs and amounts required to include a graduate assistant in your project. So again, is it allowable? Can you do it following laws and regulations? Is it allocable? Is that amount of money allocated to a certain very specific item in your budget? Is it reasonable? Is that what it costs in the market, or does it not have any conflict of interests? Important. And is it consistent? Is it what your institution commonly does, or the sponsor institution commonly does, or at a federal level what is commonly practiced? So this is essentially something you will do at the second stage of your budget. You can go back to the first video in budgets to get an idea of how to go from scratch to a first draft of your budget, and then here you already start advancing into a very final draft and a final budget, respecting these 4 cost principles. If you have questions along the way, this is really a excellent go-to place to come back to, even later in the post-award stage. So after you have been awarded and you want to do budget modifications, or you don't know exactly how to spend, something came up in the middle of your planned project and you need to figure out if you can do something or not, coming back to the 4 cost principles is a great way to start. So this is it for this video, and I see you in the next video.